data-driven content strategy conversation. So please help me welcome Kate Purdy, Vice President Marketing and PR for Signal Financial Federal Credit Union. Welcome. Thank you for presenting for us.
All right, thank you. All right, I feel like this is the time I'm supposed to make the joke about this being the last session and it's happy hour next, but no, I'm really excited to be here today to talk about data-driven content strategy. We've heard so much about data, this whole day, and we all know that data really drives personalization and marketing campaigns, but I think outside of marketing and outside of our discipline, there's really kind of this disconnect around people seeing that content strategy and the content and the communications that we put out can also be data-driven as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is really how we've shifted our marketing and content strategy at Signal Financial over the past year to be one that focuses on data. So just a little bit about Signal Financial and myself. So Signal Financial Federal Credit Union is one that is located just outside of Washington, D.C., and our membership base is everyone in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. We started off as the Washington Telephone Federal Credit Union, so Washington Telephone company employees. They then turned into Verizon, and eventually we opened our field of membership to be for the community. That was in the early 2000s, and around that time too, WTF was becoming the really big thing that was going around, or WT, saying the full word that my daughter tells me I say too much when I'm driving. So WTFCU then became Signal Financial. We've been around for 77 years, and with that, I have been at Signal for just about a year and a half. Prior to that, my background has been in professional services and agencies, working really with trade associations and nonprofits. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump into my agenda. Part of, I think, being in a multi-client environment is I brought agendas with me over to Signal, as well as really intense project plans. But really what I'm going to talk about today is why we made that shift to data-driven strategies. What were the data sources that we use? We are a $400 million credit union. We have about 23,000 members, and we're a 3-person team. So, I like to say we have those champagne tastes with a beer budget. So a lot of it is working with what we have to ultimately be building better marketing and better personas that are then aligning our content to, ultimately see results. So why do we make the shift to data-driven strategy, especially with our content? So when I came into Signal, the marketing team was really trying to be everything to everyone. We were sending an email for every single webinar that we were having, and we have a fantastic education partner, and we're doing probably 3 to 4 webinars, a month through this vendor that we work with. So it was a lot. It was a lot about webinars, a lot about events that we might have at our Virginia branch that our Maryland members probably aren't going to drive an hour to. So it really was something where the team didn't feel empowered to not only prioritize for themselves, but to be able to have that conversation around what do our members actually care about, and is this the best use of our time? We also were really disconnected. So email communications talked about products, talked about our share certificates or our webinars, but then our digital ads told a totally different story because we were working with an outside marketing vendor. And then our social media was focused on maybe a employee touch point, and everything was really just disconnected, and our digital conversation and our digital story didn't make sense. We didn't have a cohesive brand. And then on top of that, once we brought them to our website, which is our number one piece of branding and content, that was a totally different look and feel as well, and a totally different tone that we had. So everything was really, really disconnected. And everything was very feature focused. I know it was mentioned earlier, checking is checking is checking, and that same thing. It was, a checking account comes with a debit card. Doesn't every checking account come with a debit card? Like, what makes our debit card better? Is it because it's blue, has our logo on it? And why should someone care about our debit card over someone else's? So what that really came to was just really low engagement with our members. We have always seen high open rates for our emails, but we weren't getting people to actually click through and take action. And really, there was just no clear why Signal. So why should someone come to Signal Financial over, the 150 other banks and financial institutions that we have in the DC area? And also, we couldn't really say why we were doing something for our members. So with that, a big piece of also why we went data-driven, certainly we have our marketing communications data and those platforms that we can pull our metrics from, but we also went through a core conversion in July 2023. So I joined the credit union in June. About a month later, we switched over our core platform. And now we're really working with just a ton more knowledge and more information about our members. So tying the fact that we now can look at all these platforms that we're using, we also are getting into products and services and the number of touch points that we have with members. We're looking at, their balances, all the demographics that come with, just having a stronger core conversion. And really just looking at the fact that also too with this, we went through, I was not there again, I came in for the last month and just kind of brought us, worked the way in, but this was an 18-month project for the entire credit union. And then, I think we converted on July 17th. July 18th, the board chair is saying, so now how are we going to get new members now that we have this great new core? Or how are we going to now engage our members? Because we've just changed all their accounts, all their credit card numbers. We've mailed out new debit cards. So now what are we going to do about it? So there was no pause for us there. And so really it looked at, okay, how can we take all this knowledge, all that we have, to just be creating a better data-driven story that's going to be really, it ties into everything that we do, but really today I really am going to be focusing on the content strategy and ultimately those audience personas that we created to be driving and really being kind of the guiding light for us to say this is how we're doing our marketing, this is why we're doing our marketing. So the first thing was gathering data sources. And so this is the thing, we had a lot coming from our core. We had a lot about our product usage, our social media metrics. At the time when I started, our social media was really tied to maybe viral videos. We would do some product offerings or, touch points around our solutions, but a lot of just kind of what was the latest and greatest. Website and digital advertising metrics were huge when we first started diving into what is the data that we have. And we were able to see, our digital ads, so the ones that our outside marketing firm was doing, or we're driving actually higher than the benchmark of click-through rates and coming to our website, but then there was a huge drop-off once they got to our site. So it was easy to see that something was going on, so the ad clearly worked, we got people to us, but then they weren't sticking around. And then also really looking at our email metrics and all these these quantitative touch points that we can look at. But then a big piece of what we did last summer was perform qualitative research. And so I did a number of focus groups with members and non-members. And this is something that, again, whatever your budget is, being able to talk to members, never underestimate the power of a free Amazon gift card for people to tell you their feelings on your credit union. And people were lovely, had a lot of really great positive feedback, and also some feedback that we really took and said, okay, what can we do to make this better and improve? And it was really looking at our brand perception, what they use, how do they feel about the location of our branches, are they using digital versus going in branch? And then also we really looked at some messaging options. And then a piece of this too that we did was really looking at our target audiences and looking beyond just our membership. And so a lot of, using what we have access to, with the size of our credit union as we are, we got into our new core and we got into that data, but we also are building out, and we're building out this past year, working with another platform to get us to that transaction level and that behavioral level data. So what we also really want to look at is, okay, so who are the people that are living in the areas of our branches and our memberships? And so we used Claritas and their zip code lookup. So they have the free version and they also have the paid for version to really be able to see, okay, what is the average income, the average age, the average type of household, the average person who is in the zip code that we're at, as well as looking at, what is everything that we're hearing from just the general consumer trends. And so with all those different touch points that we had and have, we then really looked at, okay, how are we going to be able to build out an audience persona? And so this is really what became a really big guiding piece for us when we put it together. And we were able to talk about it and really be able to say, okay, who is our member? So we built out 5 audience personas for the different members and potential members that we wanted. So this is one of them. Her name is Sarah. And really this started to tell the story behind who Sarah is. And we were able to use all the information that we learned from, who are our current members, so from what we got from our core system, as well as looking at, the zip codes and looking at who is the person that is living in the areas that we, want to gain more membership. And then what did we hear from those focus groups? And what do we know about just the generational and all the information that we gathered from our research? And with it, we really were able to then to really transition a lot of our content and a lot of our marketing from being that, okay, it's feature level, it's our checking account with our debit card, and really starting to push the team to say, okay, how are we answering the question for Sarah and for all of our audiences of what's in it for me and why should I care? Because that's what people want to know. To drive action, you have to answer those two questions, because if you don't, they're not going to do anything. And that comes from your messaging, from your marketing campaign, or from just the general content that you're driving and that you're creating in the topics. And the really cool thing about our audience personas is this is something that the entire leadership team and our board could also latch onto as well. And so our leadership team now, when we meet, when we talk about new products or new solutions that we want to put out, or what services or what fintech should we be partnering with, we go back to, okay, but what do our target audiences want? What do we know about them? I can't say that we're saying, well, Sarah wants this and Mason wants that, but it's talking about the conversation around, okay, based on what we know, based on the data that we have about our members, we think that adding credit score dashboard into our online banking would be valuable. And here's why. And here is all of the value add and all the reasons that someone should care about our credit score dashboard. So we're really starting to use it at that strategic level to talk about our members and talk about our audiences. And it's also something that's really has helped out at the board level as well. A lot of our board members, anyone else has worked with the board, it's, I'm your average member. That's what I hear from the board chair is, well, I want to put my check in, I want to go into the branch, I want to put my check in. That's what every member wants. Well, that's not necessarily true. There is a different solution for every type of audience that we have, and putting that name or that face and that story to what our just general, well, no, actually, based on the data and based on what we have, not everyone wants to deposit a check in branch. By able to saying, okay, well, we've actually built these out. We've actually built out these profiles and these personas around our audiences, allowed us to kind of get that buy-in from them and allowed them to reflect on the fact that they're not not every member is them. And we all do it, right? I mean, I think that's a big thing about marketing is we have to take ourselves out of it. So there are some Mondays where I'm like, every member probably has too high a childcare cost, but it's like, no, that's just me. That's just me. I gotta take that out. No, so really, it's just that it serves as that reminder for us of who our members are and what are we doing and kind of how are we answering these two questions for them. I'm gonna skip that slide. So really then, we built these, we build out our data. We're continuing always to look at our data to improve our audience personas. We're looking at them really at a quarterly basis now as we capture more information from our transaction level data. And the first thing that we really looked at to change was our website. I mean, this is our biggest piece of content. It is your first impression. I'm sure if people are going out for dinner tonight, you checked the website before you decided if you're gonna go there or not. And what we were seeing, as I mentioned earlier, was the data was showing us that the digital ads worked, but then the website didn't. So this is our new website. I did not put any slides up or pictures of our old website, but really what we did was we focused on answering that question right up front of who is Signal and what do we stand for? We are here as a credit union, as a member organization. We want to help you take ownership of your financial journey. That's what our ultimate goal is. It's not about us as a credit union. It's not about our rates. This is what we want to do for you. And we have the data that backs it up, and the fact that Gen Zs are more likely to want to support a brand or a product that's sustainable, that has a cause mission behind it. And so that was something that we went into extensively when we talked about what our website was going to say, when we really started it. But not only did we do the visuals and did we look at the color palette, and we really did a whole rebrand of the organization. We also really looked at that information architecture and how are people navigating through the website. The previous website, it was very, you have deposits, you have lending, and it was just very how we as a credit union would think people would want to navigate through it. But we had to really look at it from that audience perspective to say, okay, but how is our target audiences, how are they interacting with our website, and where do we ultimately want them to go and to take action? And that really was something else that we also looked at with the website too, because our social media goes there, all of our channels go back to the website. But we also looked to really revamp our blog. So previously, our blog had about 5 or 6 categories, and they were all about Signal Financial. We had one for press releases, one for news, one for Signal events, one for, it was just all Signal. And then there was one about education. And it was like, well, no offense to, our COO, but I don't think many of our members want to read a press release about our new CEO. They want to know what's the education. And so it was something where we had to also flip around and look at, is our blog working? Are our articles working? What are we talking about? And we also pulled out from our focus groups and really are leaning into that credit union story, especially because it is such a concentrated and competitive financial industry. And so really pulling out the fact that our credit union and credit unions have that story of financial education. So we have a whole section on our website as well around fraud protection, around how to use online banking as we're trying to move our entire membership to that digital space, as well as, just general knowledge and information to help them, bank better. And a big piece of something that we also put out there, in addition to our mega navigation or information architecture, was that we also really looked at these specific landing pages for the life stages that our member and audience personas are actively interested in. So we have planning my kids' financial journey, big purchases, saving smarter, home buying. So we really built out pages that weren't just about one product. It's about, okay, so you're thinking about home buying. Well, here's our education. Here's some education articles on it. Here's a mortgage calculator. Here's our high yield savings account if you're not ready yet to buy, but you want to start getting more for your down payment. So really looking at ways that we could build out that story and kind of take away the guesswork of our audience personas and our Sarahs maybe needing to go and find in 3 different locations the ways that we could help her in that home buying process. And then a big thing that we did this past year, the team and I really looked at, okay, how are we aligning content to those target audiences? And this is really where we are empowered to say, that's great that we're doing so many webinars, we're not gonna do so many emails on them. This is not what our members wanna see. We can do it in a different way. We can put it in a different channel. But a lot of our content in particular, we're really leaning into our video, into our social media, into our articles. A lot of our content strategy is around themes. So we're putting everything into one direction. So right now it's, fall with Signal. We'll do that for a few months. Then we'll go into giving back in the holiday season. But we're really looking at how are we aligning all of our content in one direction. We have put out a number of different videos. So we have our Signal Smart Tips, which are 30 seconds to a minute of just tips that work really well on TikTok. They're just talking about a quick hit, and it's not about Signal, it's about some sort of financial need that we know our members or potential members are interested in. We also have started a video series called Signal Sips, spilling the tea on your finances. So we're really trying to talk more. We talk with a lot of different subject matter experts in our credit union about business, about saving for college. So a lot of these different ways, and then we take that content and we'll do a transcript. We'll take, maybe a 15-minute interview and we'll break it down to 30-second sound bites, and then we can piece out throughout the month. And then we're also really, really working on that and have really started going in the direction of the personalized email campaigns, really focusing on that value and that result, not just those features. And then what about everything else? Because we still had to answer to but we're doing these webinars, but doesn't everyone want to see, the member appreciation week that we did? So we went back to a good old-fashioned e-newsletter. We have and that's just everything that, that section of our membership who is really tied to seeing what we're doing in branch, hearing about all these pieces, they read our emails. And we also have a really robust section of our website that is community involvement, or what are we doing next, or how can we really talk about it there. So it's looking at ways that we haven't necessarily lost anything, but it's just a way that we're changing the conversation. And when we talk with different teams about prioritization, it's not a no. It's not, well, we're not going to put up that webinar, or we're not going to talk about this. It's, okay, we're going to put it in this channel because we know that the target audience for these webinars actually, actively go here. And then that allows us and frees us up to do more of our content generation and different communications around what majority of our members or our future members are interested in. And the results. So this is over the past year, but we've doubled the click-through rates of our email communications, which was a really, really big piece for us because while we were seeing people opening, they weren't clicking. So that has really been great. You know, we had a 4% increase in our email communications. It's been even higher since we rebranded this past June, but I wanted to show a year of results. We have almost a 5% year-over-year direct traffic to the website increase, and I said direct because I know that I could just purchase more people coming to our website and put more into digital ads, but this is the direct organic traffic. We had a 30.87% increase in session traffic from organic social media. So this really told us that aligning our content with the audience on the channels, aligning our content with the types and the formats that they're looking for was working because more people from those channels are coming to us. We had 2.7 times more video views, 2 times more hours of views in YouTube. We started TikTok this past year as well, and that continues to increase for us. And I think a big piece of why YouTube has been so successful and social media has been so successful as well is that we were able to realign staff time from the webinar emails and these things that we always thought that we had to do to now actually building and creating quality content. And so that's where we're seeing those results. And those are results that I can then report and talk about if someone does ask or when someone asks, you know, how are we promoting our webinars or how are we doing this? And then we also really saw a retention rate higher than the industry average. We're looking at 92, 93% retention rate, which after a core conversion, we are all pretty excited about because it's a lot to go through. So that was my kind of case study on content strategy and really how we've changed it to be data-driven at Signal over the past year. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
My question is, and this is fantastic, like the growth, being able to quantify how the tools and the marketing pieces that you're creating are making a difference. Then will you look at it like a year from now to then look at ROI, additional dynamics of ROI for your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a piece too that, I just couldn't share in the results. But a lot of what we're doing now as well, and in this next year, is we're going from that channel level metrics to the campaign level metrics. So we're really working in our digital platform that we have to be able to say, okay, all of our digital ads and our email communications that were about our share certificates, we're now able to show with Google Tag Manager, these are the conversions that we're getting. So it's not perfect, we aren't there yet to be able to show the conversions if someone walks into a branch and opens it up, but my goal is to be able to show, because then we can make the assumptions, right? If we're going out and we're marketing and we're producing all this content and then we're seeing the increase in our deposits, well, we can make the assumptions of how did they hear about our new bundle? All we've done is promote it. So we're really working on that campaign level and to be able to then show, okay, the KPIs around engagements, we're showing that year-over-year traffic, but we're also showing, okay, we're getting new members to our website, and then also we're showing those conversions. We're using our digital advertising platform that we have. Yeah. Come over here.
Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah.
Just a question. So with this new approach to content strategy, what impact, if any, did you see for search engines?
Yeah, definitely. And so that is where we, with our new website redesign that we did in June, we partnered with a really great agency that focused on search engine optimization. And we're working with our blog, and we have the plugin with WordPress to be able to do it. And we're seeing a lot more, even in just the past 3 or 4 months. I can see that year-over-year traffic is increasing with more coming in. And that's something that we're just continuing to have to look at the metadata. And a lot of what we did too with our website, because I think it's so easy when you make a new web page, you just put the title of the page as, the URL. But a lot of what we did with our agency is they really found those keywords for us so that our pages are actually tied to. So instead of saying Signal Smart Savings, it says, Signal Financial / high yield savings. So we're definitely seeing that has been a huge lift for us as well since we launched in June. Yep.
Hi, to echo, I really appreciate this presentation. I know you briefly mentioned that you had a tips series that seemed to perform better on TikTok. What was the trial and error process that you guys went through for figuring out not only which content to repurpose, but which platform is the best place for said content?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I have a fantastic digital content specialist who that is what she knows. She stays on top of those on those trends. She stays on top of the trending audio and how can we apply a video or make a viral trend and then do that. And that comes down to, it's a balancing act, right? Because there are some things like we do our Signal SIPs series, and we know that they're doing well on YouTube, and then we start to splice it down. What we're finding with TikTok is it is more of those viral trends as people are scrolling, so our education content doesn't perform as well there as it does on Instagram. So it's a lot of the trial and error, it's a lot of the looking at the metrics, and sometimes too we're looking at, TikTok fluctuates for us so much. We will have we did a post in February where we asked everyone in the office, or not everyone, but people who want to participate, what was Usher doing at 7 o'clock, because he was Super Bowl halftime show, and that, I don't think we still haven't reached those numbers. So it also is just that how quickly can you get onto that viral trend, and sometimes we do it and we don't go anywhere, and sometimes we do it and that video took off for us. So the biggest thing that we say, and what I say to my team is, you gotta try it, and if it's not suitable for work, let's do it, and let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, we don't do it again. Yeah.
On the results, I had a quick question. Just curious how you were able to attribute retention to content change, because typically we are able to get to vanity metrics, but we know it works.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, definitely. So I did not go to I can tell you that this exact piece of content created that retention, and that's actually a big conversation that I'm trying to change the conversation within the credit union with the leadership team and also with our board, because I don't want us to get to a place where it is, well, digital advertising isn't working, so we're cutting the budget for that. My goal is always our holistic approach is driving that retention. Let me be the one within my team to manage what's working and what's not working. But I will say that prior to starting this journey on data-driven content and really focusing on that engagement piece and really putting content out there to the membership, we had not done a lot of engagement for a number of years, especially with the core conversion and what we were doing. So I can't say it was exactly the content strategy, but I can say that our engagement, the KPIs that we tie up to engagement are working, and I just wanted to show another data point for the credit union. Yeah.
Thinking about as a user. So I go to YouTube when I want to learn something, and I know there are experts there who know how to use an Allen wrench or whatever. So I could be the same person, but I use the platforms for different things. So I was just curious, and you may have shared this, but do you look at, and Facebook is now become for the older generation, and Instagram's for the younger generation, and something else is on the horizon. So how do you have your avatar or your persona of a Sarah? Do you say Sarah will play really well on Instagram, but Joe will play really well on Facebook, and still have a unified message that says, and this is us?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, we are a community-based credit union. So we are open to everyone within the DMV. And so it's changing the value, I don't say it's changing the value proposition, but it's changing the why should I care based on who we think that target audience is. And it's changing we might post a viral video on TikTok that we would definitely not post on Facebook. And not because it's not suitable for work, I don't know if I said that right, but more because we know that it won't land as well with that audience. So we're not changing who Signal is, and if you go to our website, we are talking to every person who could be our member, who is our member. It's more, we're looking at the content and are we putting the content in front of the right people? So on Instagram, we might do more, so millennials are there more and older Gen Z. So we might say we're putting a lot about home buying on Instagram. That's not to say we won't post maybe about it, but that's where we're getting more traction. We also found when we were doing digital advertising, and when we were really doing it with our agency last year, we were doing a lot of Facebook meta ads, and we talked about that earlier. And we were finding that, I mean, Meta is Facebook. They're always going to go back to Facebook as their number one. And so what we really found is we were going through the, our digital strategist at the time was putting up ads, and it was only really getting lift on Facebook. And so I challenged the company, because it was an outside vendor and we're paying them. And I said, okay, well, let's do two separate. Let's see what happens, because you're telling me that Meta's always going to choose Facebook. So really, there's very similar messaging, but we just changed the photo out, and we did a separate Instagram versus a separate Facebook campaign. And we saw a significant improvement on Instagram because we put there a lookalike, an audience member who looks like, it was a millennial, it was a female, and she was shopping. And that really took off on Instagram. And then we did a totally different, visual for Facebook. So that's even where the data can be looking at your visuals, at your colors, at your brand, everything that you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great.